Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. It seems that the dust has settled in Egypt. The political reality is now being cemented with interim leaders in place and the military ruling the country. And now joining us to discuss all this is Mohammed El-Mashed. Mohammed is a Cairo-based independent journalist who wrote for Egypt Independent for 2 years. Thanks for joining us, Mohammed.
Thanks, Jessica.
So, Mohammed, can you just describe for us what you're seeing there on the ground?
Well, there's a continuation of protests near the Rabaa Adawiya, where the pro-Morsi camp is still sitting in. I mean, they've done more than sit in now. They actually have a full-fledged sort of Tahrir-esque setup there, where they have bathrooms, they have showers. Ramadan's, it's the month of Ramadan, where most people, definitely in the Morsi camp, will be fasting. Most of Egypt is fasting, and they break their fast at sunset. So they have an infrastructure set up to have everyone eating at sunset. I mean, they're there for the long haul, it seems. And today being Friday, the general day when people protest in Egypt, because it's easy since many men are already congregating in mosques. There have been a lot of protests, a lot of marches and attempts to march towards the military leadership's positions or ministries. So it's still ongoing. It's the political scene is, I mean, it seems like it may be settling with a cabinet in place now, finally. However, there hasn't been any sort of consensus reached where Egypt in general could sort of rest at ease that there'll be some sort of stability.
So let's talk a little bit about the opposition, specifically the liberal opposition. We know that they were up in arms when Morsi issued a constitutional decree, and then also when he appointed a general prosecutor. Now that the military is in power, we're hearing that they are virtually silent over this. What is your take?
Well, I mean, it's important to note that the military will say that they are not in power, that this is just the roadmap that they put in, and the head of the Constitutional Court is now the interim president. I mean, when Morsi issued his constitutional decree late last year, it's true, his opposition, not just liberal, but much of his opposition across the board, were up in arms. As you said, they refused, they rejected it as sort of a dictatorial, unilateral move to consolidate a lot of the centers of power under the president and under his within sort of the realm of his influence. What happened with the military is that, yes, exactly as you said, like everyone seems to be quiet about this unilateral move by the military to issue a roadmap. However, it has been sugar-coated also in the garb of a decree that has some sort of consensus, given that they brought in ostensibly representatives from different factions, the two major religions in Egypt, Islam and Coptic Christianity, as well as many who are considered to be revolutionary leaders or leaders from the 25th January revolution. So a lot of the opposition, a lot of the liberal groups, a lot of the anti-Morsi groups and pro-military roadmap groups will say that this was a consensus, this was a necessary step to keep Egypt from going further and further into a path that may lead to something similar or looking like a civil war.
Okay, let's talk about one of the leaders in this liberal opposition. We have ElBaradei. What would you say does ElBaradei have to gain in all of this, the ouster of Morsi?
Well, Baradei has been an interesting kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say enigmatic, but he's been an interesting figure from the beginning, from the anti-Mubarak movements before. And it must be said that he was a driving force even before he returned to Egypt after the 25th of January. I was there at the airport when he came, and everyone was waiting to see what Baradei would be bringing to the table. When he came, he participated in the 25th January revolution. He was unequivocal in calling for Mubarak to step down. He was unequivocal in calling for consensus building and for the people of Egypt to rise and take control of the country after the ouster of Mubarak. What happened recently, I mean, Baradei has been very critical of the Morsi regime. He refused to run in many presidential elections. He refused to have a role in democratic processes under the military rule, and he would say that I refuse to participate because he didn't think that the military would help run a clean democratic process. So now what he seems to have gained, not seems to stand to gain, is an actual executive position in the Egyptian government. Whether or not this means that he will have a position in the long haul, I mean, Baradei definitely he's not a stranger to the political scene in Egypt and political scenes in other countries. And usually when people take positions in interim governments, as what happened in many of the cabinets before Morsi even, it usually doesn't mean that these same people will become leaders in permanent structures or permanent political fixtures to come. So whether or not Baradei stands to gain as an individual isn't as clear as whether or not the liberal and anti-Morsi camps see this as a way to sort of cement their position in Egyptian politics in years to come, whether or not the military will still have a direct involvement in politics.
So, Mohammed, let's talk about Vice President ElBaradei's relationship with the international community. I know there was something that came up recently between the Turkish Prime Minister and Vice President ElBaradei. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think the interaction speaks more towards the international community's reaction to this question of is it or is it not a coup? Erdogan definitely thinks it's a coup. We can't forget that Erdogan has been he's been the main sort of bastion of anti-Ataturkism in Turkey, not Ataturkism as a military creed or allowing the military to have as much power as they once had in Turkey, undergoing kind of 4 coups over the past few decades. So Erdogan, his position is obviously against the military taking the steps it did, and he unequivocally calls it a coup. He refused, according to a video released from Turkey, quoting him, saying that he refuses to meet with ElBaradei, who is vice president for international affairs. He requested to meet Erdogan. Erdogan apparently said no, because how can I meet with you after you, by all accounts, would have or did not gain more than 1.5% of the popular vote? I don't know what vote he's talking about, but it's clear what vote he's talking about with Morsi, saying that, well, there's a guy Morsi, who won over 51% of the vote, and I must meet with him, and it's not an honor for me to meet an unelected representative of the people when I could meet with an elected one. This is causing a lot of issues with Turkey, between Turkey and Egypt. It's apparently causing issues between Turkey and the UAE. There are reports that the UAE has issues and is threatening with sort of economic, is threatening economically Turkey to retract some of its investments because of its position on Egypt. The UAE obviously has a very strong position on Egypt in support of what just happened in Egypt, and they consider it to be a movement supporting the people's desires. Now, this is it speaks to the central question of whether or not it's a coup. Yesterday, I was hanging out with a friend of mine who's an officer in the military. He believes wholeheartedly in the military, thinks Sisi is an honorable soldier. But when I asked him, is it a coup or is it not? He just looked at me and said, listen, I mean, we're in the streets. Like, the soldiers are in the streets. We're in control of civil territories. I was always taught that this is a coup. So it all revolves around this central issue of, is this a coup? Is this not a coup? Are coups always good? Are coups always bad? We could go on for hours about this, but obviously in Egypt, if you consider a coup, then you are against the military, the rhetoric now in the streets. If you're against the coup, then you are pro-Morsi, and these are the semantics being thrown around, and it's obviously resonating on the world scene.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Mohammed.
Thanks, Jess.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.